The rain battered the streets of Manhattan, a relentless drumbeat against the pavement, but inside the tiny coffee shop on Bleecker Street, the world felt still. Ellie Harper, 25, sat frozen, her fingers trembling around a chipped ceramic mug, as the woman across from her, Lila Monroe, her first love, whispered words that sliced through her heart. "I can't do this anymore." In that moment, the universe seemed to collapse, leaving Ellie drowning in the wreckage of a love she'd fought so hard to keep. Ellie's life hadn't always been this fragile. Growing up in the shadow of her mother, Vivian Harper, a billionaire real estate mogul, Ellie had everything except freedom. Vivian's empire, built on steel and ambition, cast a long shadow over her only daughter. From private schools to curated friendships, every step of Ellie's life had been orchestrated. But Ellie was never the polished heiress her mother wanted. She was messy, defiant, with a heart that beat for art and rebellion. And for women. That last part was the fracture that broke everything. At 18, when Ellie came out to her mother, it wasn't a conversation. It was a war. Vivian's icy blue eyes had narrowed, her voice cutting like glass. "You will not disgrace this family." The rejection wasn't just words, it was a severance. Vivian cut Ellie off, no trust fund, no contact, no love. Ellie was left with nothing but a duffel bag and a stubborn will to survive. She moved to New York City, piecing together a life as a freelance artist, her paintings vibrant with the pain and passion she couldn't voice. But the wound of her mother's rejection never healed. Now, 7 years later, Ellie sat in this coffee shop, staring at Lila, the one person who'd made her feel whole. Lila was 26, a social worker with a laugh like sunlight and a fierceness that matched Ellie's own. They'd met at a gallery opening a year ago, where Ellie's paintings hung raw and unapologetic. Lila had lingered by a canvas, a swirl of reds and blues depicting two women embracing under a stormy sky, and said, "This feels like a secret you're shouting." They'd been inseparable since, their love a quiet rebellion against a world that often felt too cruel. But tonight, Lila's eyes were heavy with something new. "Ellie, I love you," she said, her voice breaking. "But I can't keep pretending this is enough. You're still running from her, from your mom, from everything. And I'm tired of being caught in the crossfire." Ellie's chest tightened. She wanted to argue, to beg, but the truth in Lila's words pinned her down. Ellie was still haunted, still fighting a ghost she couldn't name. The next morning, Ellie woke to an email that stopped her cold. It was from Vivian's assistant. "Mrs. Harper requests your presence at Harper Tower tomorrow at 10 a.m. No explanation, no warmth. Just a summons. Ellie's first instinct was to delete it, to keep running. But something, curiosity, anger, or maybe desperation, made her pause. What did her mother want after 7 years of silence? Against her better judgment, she decided to go. Harper Tower loomed over Midtown, a glass monolith that screamed power. Ellie stepped into the lobby, her worn sneakers squeaking against the marble floor. She felt out of place, a smudge on her mother's perfect world. The elevator ride to the 60th floor was a slow suffocation, each ding a reminder of the life she'd been exiled from. When the doors opened, Vivian stood at the far end of a sleek office, her silhouette framed against a panoramic view of the city. "Eleanor," Vivian said, her voice as cold as ever. She was 55, her blonde hair pulled into a severe bun, her designer suit immaculate. "I'm dying." The words hit like a punch. Vivian explained, "Pancreatic cancer, 6 months at most." Ellie's mind reeled. She wanted to feel nothing, but grief and rage tangled inside her. "Why am I here?" she demanded. Vivian's eyes softened, just for a moment. "I want you to take over Harper Enterprises." Ellie laughed, a bitter sound. "You disowned me for being who I am, and now you want me to run your empire?" Vivian's lips tightened. "This isn't about your choices. It's about legacy. You're my daughter, whether I like it or not." Ellie stormed out, her heart pounding. She didn't want her mother's money or her empire. But the offer gnawed at her. Could she reclaim what was hers? Could she prove Vivian wrong, not just about her, but about everything? That night, she called Lila, voice shaking. "I'm going to do it," she said. "I'm going to take her company and make it mine." Lila was silent for a long moment. "Ellie, are you doing this for you or for her?" The question lingered as Ellie threw herself into the plan. She enrolled in business classes, studied Harper Enterprises structure, and reached out to old allies of her mother's, charming them with the grit Vivian never understood. But the deeper she went, the more she felt the pull of her mother's world, a world that demanded perfection, control, and sacrifice. Ellie began to change. Her art, once her lifeline, gathered dust. Her calls to Lila grew shorter, her temper sharper. By the end of the first month, Ellie had won over key board members, her determination a mirror of Vivian's own. But at what cost? Lila's absence was a growing ache. One night, alone in her tiny apartment, Ellie stared at a half-finished painting of Lila's face, the colors blurred by tears. Had she traded one cage for another? The question burned, but she pushed it down. She had to keep going. She had to win. Ellie's days blurred into a haze of spreadsheets, meetings, and late-night study sessions. Harper Enterprises was a labyrinth of power plays and hidden agendas, but she navigated it with a fire she didn't know she had. She was no longer just the rejected daughter. She was a contender, a force. Yet, every step deeper into her mother's world pulled her further from the person she'd been. Her sketchbook lay untouched, her paintbrushes dry. The vibrant chaos of her old life felt like a distant dream. Vivian watched her daughter's transformation with a mix of pride and unease. From her penthouse, weakened by chemo but still sharp, she tracked Ellie's progress. "You're learning," she said during one of their tense meetings, her voice thin but cutting. "But you're still too soft. This world will eat you alive if you don't harden." Ellie bristled. "I'm not you," she shot back. But Vivian's words lingered, a poison seeping into her resolve. Lila, meanwhile, was slipping away. Their texts grew sparse, their calls strained. One evening, Ellie invited Lila to a rare dinner at her apartment, hoping to bridge the gap. Lila arrived, her blonde hair tucked behind her ears, her eyes wary. "You're different," she said, stirring her pasta without eating. "You're becoming her." Ellie's stomach dropped. "I'm doing this for us," she insisted. "If I take over, we can have everything: security, freedom." Lila's laugh was hollow. "You think money fixes this? I just want you, Ellie. The real you." The argument escalated, words cutting deeper than either intended. Lila left, slamming the door, and Ellie stood alone, the silence deafening. She wanted to chase after her, but the weight of her ambition held her back. She told herself she'd fix it later, after she'd won. But later never came. Lila stopped answering her calls. Ellie threw herself harder into Harper Enterprises, using work to numb the pain. At the office, Ellie faced new challenges. The board, a mix of loyalists and skeptics, tested her at every turn. One member, Richard Grayson, a silver-haired executive with a sharp smile, saw her as a threat. "You're not ready for this, Eleanor," he said during a heated board meeting. "You're playing at power, but you're still that little girl who ran away." Ellie's jaw clenched. She leaned forward, her voice steady. "I'm not running anymore. And I'm not asking for your approval." The room went silent. She'd won the moment, but Grayson's eyes promised to fight. Outside work, Ellie's world shrank. Her old artist friends stopped inviting her out. They didn't recognize the woman in tailored suits and sharp heels. One night, desperate for connection, she went to a lesbian bar in the West Village, hoping to feel like herself again. But the music felt too loud, the crowd too distant. She left early, clutching a whiskey she didn't drink, and wandered the city streets. In a quiet alley, she saw a mural, two women holding hands, painted in bold, defiant colors. It reminded her of her own work, of the person she'd buried. Back at Harper Tower, Vivian summoned Ellie again. "You're close," she said, her voice weaker now. "But you're losing yourself." "I see it." Ellie snapped. "You don't get to lecture me on losing myself. You threw me away." Vivian's face crumpled, a rare crack in her armor. "I thought I was protecting you," she whispered. "From a world that chews up people like you." Ellie stared, stunned. Was this an apology? A confession? She didn't know how to respond. That night, Ellie made a reckless decision. She called Grayson, offering a deal, his support for her takeover in exchange for a stake in a new development project. It was a gamble, one that tied her closer to the corporate machine. Grayson agreed, but his smirk told her she'd sold a piece of her soul. As she hung up, her phone buzzed, a text from Lila. "I miss you, but I can't watch you disappear. Please, Ellie, come back." Tears stung Ellie's eyes. She typed a reply, then deleted it. She couldn't go back, not yet. By the end of the second month, Ellie had secured key allies, but the cost was mounting. Her apartment was a mess of files and coffee cups, her paintings forgotten. She caught her reflection in a window one day, sharp cheekbones, tired eyes, a stranger in her own skin. Lila's words echoed, "You're becoming her." Ellie pushed the thought away. She was so close to winning, to proving she was more than her mother's reject. But at what price? Ellie stood at the edge of a precipice, though it looked like a boardroom. The mahogany table gleamed under harsh fluorescent lights, and the board members' eyes bored into her. She was presenting her vision for Harper Enterprises, a bold restructuring to prioritize sustainable urban development, a nod to her own values. But Grayson's voice cut through her pitch like a blade. "Idealistic," he sneered. "This isn't a charity, Eleanor. It's a business." Ellie's pulse raced, but she held her ground, countering with data and projections she'd memorized over sleepless nights. Some nodded, others whispered. She was winning them, but it felt like losing herself. Outside, spring was blooming across New York, but Ellie barely noticed. Her world was confined to glass towers and endless emails. She hadn't painted in weeks, hadn't felt the rush of a brush against canvas. Lila's absence was a constant ache, a void she filled with work. She told herself it was temporary, just until she secured the company. But late at night, when the city hummed below her tiny apartment, she wondered if she was lying to herself. Vivian's condition worsened. During a visit to her mother's penthouse, Ellie found her frail, a shadow of the titan she'd known. "You're almost there," Vivian rasped, her hand trembling as she reached for a glass of water. "But you're fighting the wrong war." Ellie's throat tightened. "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked. Vivian's eyes, cloudy but piercing, held hers. "You're trying to prove something to me. But what about you? What do you want?" Ellie had no answer. She left, shaken, her mother's words a splinter in her mind. Desperate for a break, Ellie went to an art gallery in Chelsea, hoping to reconnect with her old self. The paintings, vivid, raw, unapologetic, stirred something in her. She lingered by a piece that reminded her of her own work, two women dancing in a storm, their bodies blurred but defiant. The artist, a young woman with a buzz cut, approached her. "You look like you get it," she said. Ellie smiled faintly. "I used to." They talked for hours, and for the first time in months, Ellie felt alive. But when the artist asked her out, Ellie froze. She thought of Lila and mumbled an excuse before leaving. Back at Harper Tower, the stakes rose. Grayson was rallying opposition, whispering doubts about Ellie's inexperience. She countered by securing a major investor, a move that earned her grudging respect but tightened Grayson's grip on her. He demanded more concessions, control over key projects, a bigger share of profits. Ellie agreed, hating herself for it. She was playing his game now, and it felt like betrayal, not just of her values, but of the person Lila had loved. One night, Ellie found an old voicemail from Lila, saved from months ago. "I believe in you, Ellie," Lila's voice said, soft and steady. "Don't let her win." Tears streamed down Ellie's face as she played it again and again. She wanted to call Lila, to beg for another chance, but pride and fear stopped her. Instead, she poured her energy into the final push for control of Harper Enterprises. She worked late, her desk littered with papers, her mind a battlefield of doubt and determination. A breakthrough came unexpectedly. A board member, an older woman named Margaret who'd been silent in meetings, pulled Ellie aside. "I see what you're trying to do," Margaret said. "You want to change things. I'll back you, but you need to show them you're not just Vivian's shadow." Ellie nodded, grateful but wary. Margaret's support was a lifeline, but it came with pressure to prove herself, not just as a leader, but as herself. As the board vote loomed, Ellie felt the weight of every choice. She was so close to winning, but the cost was clearer now. Her art, her love, her identity, all were slipping through her fingers. One evening, she walked to the Hudson River, staring at the water's dark ripples. She thought of Lila, of the mural in the alley, of the girl she'd been before ambition consumed her. Could she still find her way back? The question hung heavy as she prepared for the fight of her life. The boardroom was a pressure cooker, the air thick with anticipation. Ellie stood at the head of the table, her heart pounding as she faced the board members, some allies, some enemies, all judging. Today was the vote to name her as Vivian's successor. She'd spent weeks preparing, but Grayson's smug presence in the corner unnerved her. "Eleanor's vision is bold," he said, his tone dripping with condescension, "but untested. We need stability, not experiments." Ellie's fists clenched. She launched into her final pitch, her voice steady but burning with conviction. She spoke of innovation, of a legacy that served people, not just profits. When she finished, the room was silent. She'd given everything. The vote was close, agonizingly so. Margaret's support tipped the scales, and by a narrow margin, Ellie was named CEO. Cheers erupted from her allies, but Grayson's cold stare lingered. She'd won, but it didn't feel like victory. As she left the boardroom, her phone buzzed, a text from Vivian. "I'm proud of you." Ellie stared at it, torn between anger and a strange, aching gratitude. Her mother's approval, something she'd craved for years, felt hollow now. That night, Ellie went to celebrate with her team at a rooftop bar overlooking Manhattan. The city sparkled below, but she felt detached, like she was watching someone else's life. Her colleagues toasted her success, but their laughter grated. She slipped away to the edge of the roof, staring at the skyline. This was what she'd fought for, wasn't it? So why did she feel so empty? The answer came in a memory, Lila's hand in hers, warm and steady, during a quiet night in Brooklyn. Ellie hadn't spoken to her in weeks. She pulled out her phone, hesitating, then dialed Lila's number. It went to voicemail. "Lila, it's me," Ellie said, her voice breaking. "I messed up. I need you. Please." She hung up, unsure if the words would matter. The next day, Ellie threw herself into her new role. Harper Enterprises was hers, but the weight of it was crushing. She faced endless decisions, budgets, contracts, layoffs. Grayson, now a begrudging ally, pushed for aggressive expansion, while Margaret urged her to stay true to her vision. Ellie tried to balance it all, but the compromises piled up. She approved projects she didn't believe in, signed deals that felt wrong. Each choice chipped away at the person she'd been. One afternoon, she visited Vivian, who was now bedridden. The penthouse felt like a mausoleum, all marble and silence. "You did it," Vivian said, her voice barely a whisper. "But are you happy?" Ellie's eyes stung. "I don't know," she admitted. Vivian reached for her hand, her grip weak but firm. "Don't lose yourself, Eleanor." "I did, and it cost me everything." For the first time, Ellie saw her mother not as a titan, but as a woman broken by her own choices. Desperate for clarity, Ellie returned to the Chelsea Gallery. The artist she'd met was there, working on a new piece. "You're back," the artist said, smiling. Ellie nodded, her throat tight. I need to remember who I am. They talked, and the artist invited her to a community art event, a space for queer creators to share their work. Ellie hesitated, then agreed. For the first time in months, she felt a spark of hope. At the event, surrounded by bold colors and raw voices, Ellie felt alive again. She sketched in the margins of a program, her hands remembering the freedom of creation. But her joy was cut short when she saw Lila across the room, laughing with someone new. Their eyes met, and Lila's smile faded. Ellie's heart sank. She approached, her voice trembling. Can we talk? Lila's nod was cautious, but it was enough. They stepped outside, the night air cool against their skin. I'm sorry, Ellie said, tears falling. I got lost, but I'm trying to come back. Lila's eyes softened, but her voice was firm. I can't keep waiting, Ellie. You have to choose who you want to be. The words hit hard, but they were fair. Ellie nodded, knowing this was her last chance to make things right. Ellie woke the next morning with Lila's words echoing in her mind. You have to choose who you want to be. She stared at the ceiling of her apartment, the weight of her new role as CEO pressing down like a physical force. Harper Enterprises was hers, but it came with strings, Grayson's influence, the board's expectations, and the ghost of her mother's legacy. She wanted to be the woman Lila loved, the artist who painted her truth, but that woman felt like a stranger now. At the office, the demands were relentless. Meetings stretched into the night, each one a battle to assert her vision while navigating Grayson's subtle sabotage. He pushed for profit-driven projects, dismissing Ellie's ideas for affordable housing as naive. She fought back, but every compromise felt like a betrayal. One evening, exhausted, she found a note tucked into her desk, a handwritten sketch from her old portfolio, a reminder of the art she'd abandoned. She didn't know how it got there, but it felt like a sign. Ellie started small, carving out time to paint again. She set up an easel in her apartment, her strokes tentative at first, then bolder. The canvas became a battleground, a place to reclaim herself. She painted two women standing in a storm, their hands clasped, their faces defiant. It was her and Lila, or who they could have been. The act of creation grounded her, but it also sharpened her guilt. She hadn't called Lila since the gallery, too afraid of another rejection. Vivian's health deteriorated further. During a visit, Ellie found her mother staring out at the city, her eyes distant. I was wrong, Vivian said suddenly. I thought pushing you away would make you stronger. It only broke us both. Ellie's breath caught. It was the closest thing to an apology she'd ever heard. Why now? She asked. Vivian's smile was faint. Because I'm running out of time. They sat in silence, the gap between them narrowing but not gone. Inspired by her mother's vulnerability, Ellie reached out to Lila. She sent a text. I'm trying. Can we meet? To her surprise, Lila agreed. They met at their old coffee shop on Bleecker Street, the place where it had all fallen apart. Lila looked tired but beautiful, her blonde hair catching the light. I'm proud of you, she said, her voice soft. But I need to know you're in this for us, not just to win. Ellie nodded, tears in her eyes. I'm figuring it out. I just need time. Their conversation was tentative, a fragile bridge between them. Lila didn't promise anything, but she didn't walk away either. Ellie left feeling lighter, like she'd reclaimed a piece of herself. But back at Harper Enterprises, the pressure mounted. Grayson orchestrated a boardroom coup, rallying skeptics to challenge Ellie's leadership. She's distracted, he argued. Unfit for the role. Ellie fought back, presenting a bold plan for sustainable projects that won over key allies. But the victory was bittersweet. She was still playing by their rules. One night, Ellie attended another queer art event, this time bringing a small painting of her own. The community embraced her, their warmth a stark contrast to the corporate world. She felt a spark of her old self, but the moment was interrupted by a call from Vivian's nurse. Her mother had taken a turn for the worse. Ellie rushed to the penthouse, her heart pounding. Vivian was barely conscious, her breathing shallow. "You're enough," she whispered, her hand squeezing Ellie's. "You always were." Tears streamed down Ellie's face as she held her mother, the weight of years of pain and love crashing over her. Vivian died that night. Ellie sat by her bedside, numb, as the city hummed outside. She'd won the empire, but at what cost? Lila, her art, her identity, all were slipping away. She looked at the painting she'd brought home, the one of two women in a storm. It wasn't finished, but it held a truth she couldn't ignore. She had to choose, her mother's legacy or her own. Vivian's funeral was a spectacle, a parade of power brokers and polished grief at St. Patrick's Cathedral. Ellie stood at the front, her black dress feeling like a costume. The eulogy she delivered was measured, praising her mother's strength while sidestepping their fractured history. But inside, she was unraveling. Vivian's last words, "You're enough," echoed in her mind, a challenge she wasn't sure she could meet. The board expected her to step fully into her mother's shoes, but Ellie felt like she was drowning in them. Back at Harper Enterprises, Grayson's power grab intensified. He leaked rumors to the press, painting Ellie as an unstable heiress unfit to lead. The headline stung. Billionaire's daughter crumbles under pressure. Ellie fought back, working late to secure a major deal that would silence her critics. But the more she fought, the more she felt like she was losing herself. Her apartment was a shrine to her old life, half-finished canvases, sketches of Lila, but she rarely touched them now. One evening, desperate for air, Ellie wandered to the Brooklyn Bridge. The city sparkled below, but she felt disconnected from it. She thought of Lila, of the life they could have had. On impulse, she called her. "I need to see you," Ellie said, her voice raw. Lila hesitated, then agreed to meet at their old spot in the West Village. When Ellie arrived, Lila was there, her expression guarded but soft. "I'm trying to understand," Lila said. "But you're still running, Ellie. From her, from us." Ellie's throat tightened. "I'm not running," she said. "I'm fighting, for you, for me. But I don't know how to do both." Lila's eyes searched hers. "Then figure it out," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "I'm not giving up on you, but I can't keep waiting." They parted with a hug, Lila's warmth lingering on Ellie's skin. It was a lifeline, but a fragile one. Back at work, Ellie made a bold move. She proposed a radical shift for Harper Enterprises, divesting from luxury developments to focus on community-driven projects. The board was skeptical, but Margaret rallied behind her, and the plan passed by a slim margin. It was a victory, but Grayson's influence loomed. He cornered her after the meeting, his voice low. "You're making enemies, Eleanor. Watch your back." Ellie met his gaze, unflinching. "I'm not afraid of you." That night, Ellie painted again, her hands moving with a fury she hadn't felt in months. The canvas was a storm of color, blues and reds clashing, two figures embracing in the chaos. It was her truth, raw and unfiltered. She posted a photo of it online, tagging the queer art community. The response was immediate: praise, invitations, a reminder of who she'd been. But it also drew attention from the press, who spun it as a publicity stunt. Grayson seized the chance, whispering to the board that Ellie was too distracted by her personal life. Ellie's worlds were colliding, and she was losing ground. She visited the gallery again, seeking solace. The artist from before, now a friend, encouraged her to submit her work for a group show. "Your art matters," she said. "It's you." Ellie hesitated, then agreed. The act of submitting felt like a rebellion, a reclaiming of her voice. But the pressure at Harper Enterprises didn't relent. A major project faltered, and Grayson blamed Ellie publicly. She fought to salvage it, working through the night, but the stress was breaking her. One morning, she found a letter slipped under her door, an anonymous note warning her to step down or face consequences. Her heart raced. Was it Grayson? Someone else? She couldn't trust anyone. As the group art show approached, Ellie poured her fear and hope into her painting. It was her and Lila, their love a beacon in the storm. She didn't know if Lila would come, but she had to believe in something. The night of the show, she stood by her work, heart pounding, searching the crowd for a familiar face. The gallery buzzed with energy, a kaleidoscope of voices and colors. Ellie stood by her painting, her heart a tight knot. The canvas, two women embracing in a storm of blues and reds, was her soul laid bare. She scanned the crowd, hoping to see Lila, but the faces blurred together. The art show was a triumph, with critics praising her raw emotion, but it felt incomplete without Lila. As the night wore on, Ellie's hope faded. She stepped outside, the cool air a relief against her flushed skin. Then she saw her, Lila, standing across the street, her blonde hair glowing under a street lamp. Ellie's breath caught. She crossed the street, her steps unsteady. "You came," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Lila's eyes were soft but guarded. "I had to see it," she said. "You're painting, it's us." They stood in silence, the weight of their history heavy between them. "I'm trying to be me again," Ellie said. "But I need you." Lila didn't respond, but she didn't leave either. Back at Harper Enterprises, the anonymous threat loomed. Ellie hired a private investigator, suspecting Grayson, but the trail was cold. The board was fracturing, with Grayson rallying dissenters. Ellie fought to hold her ground, pushing her community-focused projects despite resistance. But the stress was relentless. She started painting again in earnest, using it as an anchor. Each stroke was a rebellion against the corporate machine, a reminder of who she was. One evening, Lila texted, "Can we talk? Really talk?" They met at a park in Brooklyn, the skyline glittering across the river. Lila was direct. "I love you, Ellie, but I can't be with someone who's half here. Are you ready to let go of her world?" Ellie's heart ached. "I'm trying," she said. "I'm stepping back from the company, delegating more. I want us." Lila's smile was small but real. "Then show me," she said. Ellie took the challenge seriously. She appointed Margaret as interim CEO, giving herself space to breathe. She poured her energy into art, creating a series inspired by her journey, love, loss, and reclamation. The queer art community embraced her, offering a home she'd forgotten. But Grayson wasn't done. He leaked a story to the press, accusing Ellie of mismanaging funds. The scandal threatened to undo her progress, and the board called an emergency meeting. Ellie faced them head-on, presenting evidence of her project's success and exposing Grayson's manipulations. The board was divided, but Margaret's support and Ellie's passion swayed enough votes to keep her in power. Grayson was ousted, his influence shattered. It was a victory, but Ellie knew she couldn't stay. The company wasn't her future, Lila was, her art was. She met Lila at their coffee shop, her heart pounding. "I'm stepping down," Ellie said. "I'm choosing me, us." Lila's eyes filled with tears. "Are you sure?" she asked. Ellie nodded, taking her hand. "I've never been more sure." They kissed, the world falling away. It wasn't a fix for everything, but it was a start. Ellie's final act as CEO was to establish a foundation for queer youth, funded by Harper Enterprises. She poured her inheritance into it, a legacy her mother would never have imagined. As she walked away from the company, she felt lighter, like she'd shed a skin that never fit. She and Lila moved into a small apartment in Brooklyn, filled with art and laughter. Ellie painted every day, her work a testament to her truth. But the past wasn't done with her. One night, she received a package, an old journal of Vivian's, sent by her mother's lawyer. Inside were letters Vivian had never sent, confessions of regret and love. Ellie read them through tears, finally understanding her mother's broken heart. She didn't forgive her, not fully, but she let go of the anger. Ellie stood in her new studio, a sunlit loft in Brooklyn, surrounded by canvases that told her story. The air smelled of paint and possibility. Lila was there, her laughter filling the space as she helped hang a new piece, a vibrant depiction of two women dancing under a clear sky. It was their future, painted with hope. Ellie had left Harper Enterprises behind, but the weight of her choices lingered, a reminder of the cost of freedom. The foundation for queer youth was thriving, a beacon for kids like Ellie had been, lost, rejected, but full of fight. She volunteered there, teaching art to teens who reminded her of her younger self. Their stories broke her heart and rebuilt it, stronger each time. Lila worked alongside her, her social work expertise grounding the program. Together, they were building something real, something that mattered. The press still buzzed about Ellie's departure, some calling it a failure, others a bold stand. She didn't care. She'd found her voice again, in her art and in Lila's love. But the past crept in. One day, a reporter contacted her, digging into Vivian's legacy. They'd found the journal Ellie had received, now public after the lawyer's leak. The letters painted Vivian as human, flawed, and desperate to reconnect. Ellie agreed to an interview, not to defend her mother, but to tell her own truth. The article was a sensation, but Ellie didn't read the comments. She was done seeking approval. Instead, she focused on her next show, a solo exhibition titled Reclaimed. Each painting was a piece of her pain, her love, her defiance. The night of the opening, the gallery was packed. Lila stood by her side, her hand warm in Ellie's. "You did it," Lila whispered. Ellie smiled, her heart full. "We did it." As the crowd admired her work, Ellie felt a shift. She wasn't the rejected daughter anymore, or the billionaire's heir. She was Ellie Harper, artist, lover, survivor. The journey had been brutal, losing Lila, then finding her again, battling her mother's ghost, then making peace with it. She'd almost lost herself to ambition, but she'd chosen love, art, and truth instead. One painting stood out, the storm from her first show, now finished with the women standing strong, their hands entwined. It was Ellie and Lila, their love a quiet triumph. A critic approached, asking about its meaning. "It's about choosing yourself," Ellie said, "and the people who make you whole." Lila squeezed her hand, and Ellie knew she'd made the right choice. Months later, Ellie and Lila walked along the Hudson, the city alive around them. They talked about the future, a home, maybe a family, definitely more art. The wounds of the past hadn't vanished, but they were healing. Vivian's journal sat on Ellie's shelf, a reminder of love lost and found. She'd regretted many things, chasing her mother's approval, pushing Lila away, but those regrets had led her here, to a life she'd built on her own terms. As they watched the sunset, Lila leaned into Ellie, her voice soft. "You're enough," she said, echoing Vivian's last words. Ellie's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. She was enough for Lila, for herself, for the life they were creating. The world could judge, but she was done running. She'd fought for her truth, and she'd won. The story wasn't over. Life never tied up neatly, but Ellie was ready for whatever came next. She had Lila, her art, and a purpose that burned brighter than any empire. The gay girl who'd been rejected had rebuilt herself, and she regretted nothing.